After much anticipation, the day is here. It's decision time for Cormani McClain. How one game this season made all the difference. We'll tell you where he's leaning and the instant impact he'll make for one lucky team. And if prime time thinks it's the right time to make a jump to the Power 5, who's next up to change the game for HBCUs? Carl Reed has a super suggestion. All that and more coming up on the College Football Recruiting Show. Welcome into the College Football Recruiting Show alongside Blair Angulo. I'm Emily Proud, and it is a big day in the world of recruiting. The number 2 player in the 2023 class will make his college decision. So let's waste no time and get right to it. Cormani McClain making his commitment tonight live on CBS Sports HQ. The crystal ball favors the Gators, but his finalists are Florida, Alabama, and Miami. So what are one of these lucky squads getting, Blair?
Yeah, a battle of heavyweights in this recruiting battle. And this is a prospect who has all the tools to be an instant impact player on the defensive side of the ball, a projected first-round draft pick in a few years, has all the physical upside that you look for in that boundary corner. A terrific player. Obviously, every program in the country would love to have Cormani McClain.
Well, much more on him later in the show. Let's go same class, different player. 4-star running back Cedric Baxter, currently committed to Texas, but he's visiting the Knolls this weekend.
Emily, you know what they say, all is fair in love and flip season. Now, Texas is going after a number of prospects that are already committed elsewhere, so they can't really push the panic button considering that Cedric Baxter is taking this official visit to Florida State. But yeah, this is just a part of the process.
Speaking of looking elsewhere, 4-star athlete Jelani McDonald decommits from Oklahoma State. He was the Cowboys' highest-rated recruit and was locked in since July. According to our own Cody Nagel of GoPokes247, the main threat to flip him, Texas.
Yeah, this is a tough blow for Oklahoma State, having just beaten Texas on the field last weekend. They lose essentially to Texas after this new offer goes out to Thompson. And you know, this is another part of the process. But I think if you're the Cowboys, you have to be confident in your own evaluations to potentially get another prospect to fill in those shoes.
All right, ESPN's College Game Day is headed to Jackson, Mississippi for a SWAC showdown between Southern and Jackson State. Our friend and birthday boy, Coach Carl Reed, joins us to break down the game and the greater impact on HBCU. So let's start with the name of this show and recruiting. The number 2 wide receiver in the 2025 class is visiting Jackson State this weekend, Caleb Cunningham. We saw Coach Prime land some big fish in the past, guys like Travis Hunter and Kevin Coleman. So, Carl, if Deion sticks around, could we see him consistently reel in blue chip prospects with some of the Power 5's best?
I think that you can consistently see him grab some of those guys because he has tremendous relationships. A lot of people look at Coach Prime and what he's done at Jackson State, and they just think of him, the Hall of Fame corner, a guy that was very famous and a great football player. But what people often overlook is the fact that he was coaching high school football. He was helping to run the Under Armour Camp Series, which has been the top series for high school prospects in the country. And so he had relationships. He has already had deep relationships with some of those players. And so the ties are there for them to want to follow him to Jackson State.
Carl, you know, Deion has opened the door for a lot of prospects that potentially could be looking HBCU. Is there anything that those colleges can do in particular, whether it be NIL or marketing or just elevating the prospect and getting them ready for the NFL, which is the ultimate goal, that could set them apart and potentially lead to them continuing to land some of these big fish?
Well, I think NIL is hard for them because of the difference in the money and some of the boosters. But what I do think that they can do at that level is somebody else needs to make a decision to make a hire that will have a similar impact to what Deion has. Deion has shown you that the exposure can come, the TV cameras can come, you can get on ESPN, you can sign big time recruits. But Jackson State made a decision as an administration that they wanted to go in that direction. And so if the other schools in the SWAC or the MEAC or around HBCU football want a similar impact, then they have to make a similar decision with their coaching hires.
Yeah, along those same lines, how has Jackson State's success on the recruiting trail helped HBCUs as a whole when it comes to both upping talent, which is the goal, but also notoriety?
Well, it puts a huge star on it. When you think about even the XFL held a combine at Jackson State for all the HBCU players. The Legacy Bowl was started. Guys are getting a ton of exposure in HBCU football. Think about the COVID year when they played in the spring, and because of the fascination with Deion, ESPN televised a lot of those games. So the exposure is there. If you're Southern University, your kids are going to get an opportunity to play against Jackson State on ESPN. So eyes are going to be on you. There's an opportunity there for you to make something special happen for yourself and get on the radar of NFL scouts, which is ultimately what most players want to do.
Carl, you said that it puts a star on it. It also puts the spotlight on it. Is it going to be tougher now for these HBCUs to potentially pull off the surprise that we saw Deion pull off last signing day?
Well, I think that you know that he's a real threat now. I think that you know that those programs are a real threat. If you've ever been to an HBCU game, the environment that you're going to have when Jackson State plays Southern this weekend is going to be huge, and it's going to be as exciting as any major college game from an atmosphere standpoint. So I do think now that the SEC and the ACC and the Big Ten schools are very well aware that there is an opportunity for kids to be interested in this, and they're on high alert.
Carl, when these coaches go into the living room of a guy, maybe out of their reach, they're trying to sell him on going to a school like this over a traditional powerhouse program. What's the pitch?
The pitch has to be that you can go and meet all of your goals from here the same way that you can do it in the other schools. They all have a long list of former NFL players that went to these schools. And even if you have to use the success at other FCS schools who've had tremendous success with the NFL draft that aren't necessarily HBCUs, you have to tailor the fact that academically, athletically, and socially, you can accomplish anything at a HBCU that you can at a major college.
Carl, we're asked to put in crystal ball predictions at 24/7 Sports when we're making some of those calls. I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball. What does HBCU recruiting look like in 5 or 10 years down the road?
Well, the big thing for that is going to depend on, can they develop a pipeline of coaches who can keep the excitement high? And that's not just prime. You have to look at how are they going to handle the coaches. That's what I want to see out of the SWAC commissioner. That's what I want to see out of the MEAC commissioner. I want to see the emphasis that they put on the quality of coaches that they bring in, because if they can solidify their leagues with a strong stable of coaches, they could be a major player in recruiting.
All right, Carl, you have a great story up right now on 247sports.com about Deion's impact on HBCUs and black coaches. So if he were to leave Jackson State, how would that impact the HBCU landscape as a whole? Is there a next man up?
It would leave a huge void. But I think that what you have to look at, whether you're Jackson State if Deion leaves, or if you're any HBCU school right now looking at your head coaching opening and you want to bring the same type of excitement that Deion brought, you have to get on the phone, and you have to get on the phone with his agent, and you have to go set up a meeting with Cam Newton. Cam Newton, in my opinion, is the guy who can bring a similar excitement to HBCU football for the same reasons that Deion did. Number one, his brother played at Howard. His brother was the quarterback at Howard. You see Cam Newton here at the Howard University homecoming. Cam Newton is also a major fixture on the youth football circuit with Under Armour. Cam Newton has one of the top 7-on-7 programs in the nation. Many of the top 4 and 5 star kids in the country over the last several years have played for the Cam Newton All-Stars. He also coaches that team. He's out there coaching the kids. He's out there calling the plays. He's been very accessible. Current Jackson State freshman and top 100 recruit Kevin Coleman out of St. Louis, Missouri, played for the Cam Newton All-Stars as well. I think you go sit down with Cam, you make your pitch, and you put something strong on his mind. He recently partnered with Overtime Elite, another opportunity to bring the top players and the top programs together. Cam Newton, in my opinion, is the next guy. If I was the SWAC commissioner, if I was the AD and president of any HBCU, I would be trying to get a meeting with Cam Newton and see if I can get him to hang the cleats up and grab his whistle and come to my HBCU.
Whew, all right. Thank you so much for that, Carl. Make sure to go check out his work on 247sports.com. Blair, we're both like a little shook right now. I mean, hearing Cam Newton potentially as a head coach in college. How crazy is it actually? Yeah, I got the little Superman going.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect shout out by Carl, right? You think about Deion Sanders and what he's been able to do at Jackson State, and you wonder, is it unique to Deion Sanders? Could someone with that type of personality, with that type of marketability, with his platform, can they be the next in line? And Cam Newton fits that bill. He also has the ties to the youth football, which Carl touched on. He understands, I think, the modern recruiting game. I think he understands what the modern recruit is looking for. And he has that pull right now, right? These are players that grew up rooting for Cam Newton in the NFL, that watched him do what he did at Auburn. This would be an ideal situation. Obviously, it's a hypothetical, but, you know, we can certainly think about it, and it all makes sense for me.
Yeah, okay, I like it. You know, he has that impact. I mean, we're all dabbing thanks to him, so we'll see how that happens. Hey, the story of the day, Cormani McClain, the Lakeland, Florida corner, and one of the most athletic and freakish players of the 2023 class, will pick a hat, reveal a shirt, or who knows, could pull out some live alligators like Aiden Mizell. Either way, whoever ends up getting him is about to get a whole lot better.
Cormani McClain, five-star cornerback from Lakeland High School out in Florida, the 6'2", 165-pounder, checks in as the number 2 overall recruit in the class of 2023, according to 247 Sports Composite Rankings, is the number 1 rated corner and top-rated player overall in the state of Florida. Cormani McClain is that dude. He's one of the most special players I've seen during my 9 years working at Max Preps. He's got Lakeland ranked at number 18 right now in the Max Preps top 25 national rankings.
He could even be a top 247 wideout. But in the secondary, at that corner position, he could legitimately take away one side of the field.
And when you watch any of his games, you probably get a little bored because quarterbacks don't even look towards Cormani Island. He's one of the most shut down and locked down cornerbacks in the class of 2023. And going back to his Lake Gibson days, the dude was an absolute ball hawk. During his sophomore and junior seasons, he combined to have 15 interceptions. And he was also a baller on offense. He racked up nearly 1,000 yards receiving and 11 touchdowns. McClain's a complete package at corner, and I expect him to make an immediate impact when he does get to the next level. His final 3 includes Alabama, Florida, and Miami.
They're getting a prospect that ultimately, if he puts it all together, to be a first-round pick and definitely have a long career on Sunday.
In an NFL comp I got for Cormani McClain is former Heisman Trophy winner, NFL Super Bowl champ, and Pro Football Hall of Famer Charles Woodson.
Us now to dive into the recruitment of 5-star corner Cormani McClain, our Steve Wiltfong, the director of recruiting at 247 Sports, and Andrew Ivins, national recruiting analyst for 247 Sports covering the Southeast. And we'll begin with you, Steve. Cormani McClain, a phenomenal prospect, a terrific defender, and obviously has all the tools, I think, that are making so many colleges go after him. What makes him special?
Well, he's as much a playmaker as there is in the secondary as I've seen in the 2023 class. You talk about 9 interceptions as a sophomore, 10 more as a junior. I don't know if I've seen a prolific taker of the ball away over sophomore and junior year in my recollection. And he's transferred over to Powerhouse Lakeland here as a senior, but he's a smooth cover guy with a lot of physical upside, good testing numbers, and a guy that, again, has taken the ball away over the course of his high school career.
For me, I think when you look at the NFL right now, let's talk about the two top rookie corners. You got Sauce Gardner and Tyreek Woolen. Both those guys are long, lengthy individuals. And I think if you search in the class of 2023 for someone that is a clear-cut model of them, it's Cormani McClain. We're talking about a kid that's 6'2". He's 160 pounds. He's got a 128-inch broad jump. He's a 4.5 kid on the lasers. And more importantly, he's a former wide receiver, just like Woolen, just like Sauce Gardner. And I think his ability to put himself in position to make a play on the ball is one of the best in the class. Steve mentioned the 19 interceptions. Here as a senior, he's only picked off one pass, but you talk to his coaches and you watch the film, that's because no one's throwing it his direction, and for good reason. But I think the ceiling is super high for Cormani McClain. This is one of the better cornerback prospects we've seen come out of the high school ranks in a while. And whoever is going to get him is going to get someone that's going to need some time. But I think once you nurture it and allow him to mature, he could be a potential CB1 one day, an all-conference player, and eventually an early round NFL draft pick.
Yeah, a ton of physical upside, right? I think a player that still needs to fill out physically to get to where he's going to be, but you see him oozing with that upside, with that potential, and he obviously projects as a very high NFL draft pick. Let's get into his recruitment. We're nearing the finish line, Steve. What's the pulse on this battle right now?
Well, Andrew and I both have our 24/7 Sports Crystal Ball forecast on Florida. Andrew logged his back in the summer. I put mine in when he was back in Gainesville for the victory over Utah. I think there has been some times where Alabama has certainly been a factor in this recruitment, and certainly you never rule out Miami with Mario Cristobal leading the charge on the trail, and we know that he prioritized Cormani early as soon as he got to Coral Gables and personally recruited the blue chip cornerback. But the buzz has been around Florida most of the process here, and he's another key recruit for the Gators as they try and turn around a defense that is really struggling, particularly against the pass, but 109 overall on defense right now, and they've made it a point of emphasis over the last two cycles landing difference makers. So I think this is a defense on the upward trend. Cormani McClain would be another nice addition.
And to tag along there, I mean, Corey Raymond, he was hired by Billy Napier to recruit elite defensive backs. So far, we've seen the Gators win some really big battles. Deshaun Mustard Johnson, who goes to school right down the road from Cormani McClain, Jakeem Jackson, another kid from the Central Florida area. I wrote a few months ago, hey, who's going to get those two? Because it looked like Cormani was trending towards Alabama. Now it sounds like the Gators might be considered the team to beat. I still like the Gators. Steve still likes the Gators. We'll see what happens. But if Florida was to add Cormani, I mean, this would be the biggest win, I think, for UF, maybe in the past decade, certainly for Billy Napier, because when Nick Saban, Alabama, they get involved for a defensive back, normally Nick Saban gets that kid. And Cormani was going to take an official visit to Tuscaloosa. It ended up not happening, but he's been there a few times unofficially. And Steve mentioned that Utah game. I think that's really what kind of maybe pushed this to change the tide of the recruitment for the Gators. You know, he was in the swamp for that week 1 win. So we'll see what happens. I like Florida. Again, he said it. You got to watch out for Mario Cristobal. I know they've been working the phones and chipping away. And then with Bama, I mean, Bama's Bama. Anything could happen in the 11th hour.
I think we wondered, right, when Billy Napier took over in Gainesville, how some of these battles would shake out between Napier, between Cristobal, the Hurricanes versus the Gators. And if Florida were to win this, it would be a significant win heading into the early signing period. When you look at the timing of this, Steve, with about 2 months to go until pen meets paper, how much momentum would this give Billy Napier?
Well, it would add to a recruiting class that ranks number 8 nationally, and I think it adds another potential championship level piece to the defense. And this started last year, and we've talked about it quite a few times on different platforms. But Florida, under the previous regime, they rarely won recruiting battles against programs like Alabama and Georgia, and that's the teams you're trying to beat on Saturdays. You're going to struggle consistently against them if you're not winning big on the recruiting trail. And you look back at the 2022 cycle, Kamari Wilson, they beat Georgia for. Shamar James, they beat Alabama and Georgia for. Chris McClellan, they fight off Oklahoma for. Devin Moore, they flip from Notre Dame. And then here in this 2023 class, They've had a lot of monster recruiting wins against a lot of those schools across the entire defense, and Cormani McClain would be another major win for them. And then moving forward, they're all in on guys like John Walker, who's committed to UCF right now, but they've had to campus several times. Defense is going to remain a major focal point for Florida down the stretch here in this 2023 cycle.
And just to tack on, Cormani's not the most vocal kid in the class of 2023, but you talk to any of his peers, they know who he is. They know he had 19 interceptions. They know that this is a kid that out at OT7 on the 7-on-7 circuit, he makes plays. So I think it would send a statement and a message to some of the kids, maybe not in the class of 2023, but at the class of 2024, 2025 and beyond, the kids that look up to Cormani. Hey, it's cool to go to Florida. That's a program that's on the upward trajectory. So I think that, and then on top of all this, Florida, let's say all these kids that they have committed stick, or a good chunk of them, this will be the best job the University of Florida has ever done at recruiting its backyard in that Sunshine State. We're talking over 12 dozen or a dozen blue chip recruits. No one's ever done that before. Not Urban Meyer. Who knows about Steve Spurrier? That was before our recruiting rankings, but this would be certainly a statement for Billy Napier, and really, I think, icing on the cake for a class that's very talented.
Jordan Hall, another local guy that they covet out of Jacksonville there, who they're pushing hard for to add to this fold.
Yeah, we'll give them some significant momentum as we make that charge towards the early signing period, and all eyes will be on five-star corner Cormani McClain, who announces his decision later today. You can catch all the work from Steve Wilfong and Andrew Ivins over at 247 Sports. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Ooh, get your popcorn ready. Cormani McClain making his college decision tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports HQ. Right after that, hop over to the 247 Sports YouTube page for reaction from Blair and our Director of Recruiting, Steve Wilfong.
Kirby, do you have any plans to do anything with recruits this coming week? Do you have any? I know it's kind of weird that you can host them but not host them. Do you have anything set up for some of the recruits maybe that could be coming to this game? Do you have any tickets set aside for them?
We're allowed to use tickets, but we can't host them. We can't do anything. So I never understand what would we do with them? We can't legally see them. We can't talk to them. We can't host them. Can't visit with them. We can say there's a ticket at the gate. Enjoy the game. So that's really all we can do, and we'll do that. We'll have some kids go to the game.
The world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Fans love it, recruiters, not so much. The Florida-Georgia game has been played in Jacksonville since FDR was president back in the 30s, but that could soon change. What will never change, though, is the great work from our friend Rusty Mansell from Dawgs247. Now, Kirby made it known that he wants to kind of do away with that neutral site game. It makes it tough on him, but the game, not the game itself, just the location. So, Rusty, what do you think should happen to this rivalry?
I think you saw it in his face. What he was saying right there was, I don't want to have recruits I can't talk to. Kirby Smart's an alpha recruiter. He's built like that. That's in his DNA, is to recruit, get in front of parents, get yourself in front of those kids. So I think the one thing with Kirby, he understands the value of a monster home game. To have Florida play in Athens every other year at least, to be able to add another home game that would be attractive to have recruits show off that new recruiting facility, the lounge they have, that new indoor they have, the new cafeteria, the new steakhouse they have. They've got it all there. They kind of got the new toys right now. So I understand on that side of it why Kirby Smart wants recruits in Athens.
Rusty, it's a difficult situation, right? Because they would want to get recruits in, but at the same time, number 2 class, 22 commitments already, not a lot of room left in this class. How do they handpick the tickets that get handed out to this game?
Well, that's a very good question. I call those big boy decisions. You realize if you tell one individual, hey, we don't have room for you, what's the ramifications of that? So I do think it's more what I'm seeing as far as visitors this weekend is more central or southeast Georgia, northern Florida type kids. Steve Wilfong there just mentioned Jordan Hall. He's a major defensive line target for the Georgia Bulldogs out of the Jacksonville area. Obviously, that was an easy one. One of their commits, Raylan Wilson, many people think could be the top linebacker in the country. He'll come over from Tallahassee. So, it's not going to be like next weekend. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's going to be some big boy decisions on who gets in the gate to see Georgia, Tennessee. But this weekend, kind of a different setting. They got a certain amount of tickets set aside. I don't think it'll be as much of a problem, but there certainly had to be a cutoff at some point.
Gotta try that steakhouse sometime. All right, Kirby, not making any excuses, though. He's taken full advantage of being in the state of Florida by visiting the number 3 edge in the country, Damon Wilson, and 4-star defensive lineman, you mentioned him, Jordan Hall. So where do things stand with Georgia's recruitment of those two?
Kirby Smart gets one Friday off in probably 30, 25 weeks. He spent that last week at Wilson's High School in Venice, Florida. Then he took a helicopter to Jacksonville, Florida, and watched Jordan Hall play for one half, and then caught that helicopter back to Sarasota to watch 5-star Damon Wilson, edge player, play last weekend. So it tells you his priority with those two specific players. You look what Georgia's done in the NFL draft, what made them successful last year, outside linebackers and defensive linemen. Just so happens that he spent his one Friday night off in Florida seeing two of those top targets at those positions.
Kirby and the Kirby chopper. Rusty, have you noticed Kirby taking his recruitment up another notch since they reached the pinnacle of college football, or has he always been this way as a recruiter?
100% built this way. When he was at Alabama, he was an alpha recruiter. Nobody thought he would get Rashad Evans, who wound up being a first-round draft pick at Auburn High School. He beat Auburn one-on-one. So Kirby Smart has got that DNA about him. I said this many times. He's an alpha recruiter. You could probably write down on pen and paper the 10 or 12 guys around the country that have that kind of title with them. But Kirby Smart is always recruiting. He's always thinking about recruiting. And I've heard him say it many times in many coaching clinics. It's about the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's.
Well, both have been spectacular, which is why they reached the pinnacle of college football. Well, Kirby Smart continuing to build that 2023 class, adding 4-star corner Chris Peel earlier this week. What does he add to the Bulldogs?
I mean, another thing when you look at Georgia, they like the length. It's funny because Alabama, now Florida, Georgia, Ohio State, they all have those one things. They want speed and length. And here's a kid, 6'1.5", 175 pounds, 10.75 100-meter laser, 44.3 triple jump. I know I'm a nerd that shows so much explosion in his hips to be able to do that. So I think when you start to the numbers back up his tape and you understand why he was so coveted by Georgia. Fran Brown, the defensive back at Georgia coach, a new coach this year, he knew him when he was at Rutgers, kind of a guy that he circled early on. Well, Will Muschamp was also at Georgia. He liked Chris Peel. So when those two came together, it was obvious he was going to stay at the top of the board. And both of those guys teamed up together to go into North Carolina to get another talented defensive back to join the Georgia Bulldogs.
We're just about 2 months to go into the early signing period. Rusty, what's next for Georgia recruiting? What do you have your eyes on?
It's these edge guys. What are they going to get there? And can they get another running back? Look, there's no secret. They're still swinging on Justice Haynes, the Alabama commit, Georgia legacy, Veron Haynes. He's going to be at Georgia next week. And he said he told Alabama staff, and he told some media, I always go to this game because of my dad and that hobnail boot play. They will be tied to his dad will be tied to the University of Georgia and the Tennessee series forever for that touchdown to beat Tennessee at the end of the game. So he said they always go as tradition. He's going to go there, but I'm 100% certain that Georgia continues to recruit him. Can they get him to flip? Right now, it doesn't seem likely. Or will they take a running back in the second spot for the portal? They got Roderick Robinson out of California to flip from UCLA to Georgia after that OV. So kind of for me, it's Jordan Hall, Damon Wilson. Can they add a wide receiver? But can they make a move with Justice Haynes? They're trying. We'll see.
All right, something Kirby is certainly not doing, looking ahead to next week, and it's likely to be a top 3 meeting of undefeateds when the Vols travel to Athens. We'll have all next week to break this game down, but Rusty, what can you tell us about just how big that weekend will be for the Dogs recruiting-wise?
Well, you start talking about big boy decisions, who gets in that one? Because, I talked to one member that inside that building a couple of days after the Tennessee beat Alabama, and their phone started blowing up immediately because recruits knew that Tennessee was going to be at Georgia. It's going to be a highly ranked game. If nothing changes, and from my understanding, it will be the highest ranked game in the history of Sanford Stadium, 100 years old, whatever. So you're talking about maybe a 1-3 if both teams take care of business this weekend. So you can understand one guy coming from California, DeAndre Moore, wide receiver committed to Louisville. He's a guy that Georgia went out and saw last week. Brian McLean flew to California to watch him play. So that's kind of the early buzz there, one of those guys. But I expect as we get into next week and we get into shows like this on our YouTube page here for 24/7 Sports, that all eyes in recruiting next weekend will certainly be on Athens, Georgia, because it will be a who's who list in Athens.
A lot of big boys decisions, and I think with Kirby Smart in particular, and I think we all know this, right? Georgia is recruiting at a different level. They are being selective. They are handpicking their recruits. How is Kirby managing that aspect of it, Rusty? Maybe the fact that he has to take a guy here or take a guy there, or maybe pump the brakes on someone because they are recruiting at just a different level.
Well, I'll tell you this. After Kirby Smart signed the 2018 class, I think it was #1 class in the country. They had 8 guys transfer within 13 months. Character has been something that Georgia, the fit into that program. Can you be coached hard? Do you want to play football more than recruiting? Now, Georgia's not perfect, but I think Kirby Smart and his staff made a conscious decision. We're going to get guys that we know want to play football. And if it means we have to make a decision to not take, a kid that's higher ranked for 24/7, which coaches don't care, but for us and our fan base, kid that's higher ranked, like Chris Peel. A lot of people asked, he's kind of on the lower end of our top 247. But I guarantee you this, at Georgia, he was as high on the board as any corner there is. So character fit, he checked boxes for them. So I think Georgia has made a conscious effort to get guys. You look at Nakobe Dean last year, a 5-star out of Mississippi, high school football player, now playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. He had a 4.2 GPA. So you think that guy didn't fit in the locker room because he loved football and he was a high character, high academic kid. Those are hard to find, but that is exactly what Georgia's looking for under Kirby Smart for sure.
Fit, incredibly important. Rusty, thank you so much for all that great insight. Be sure to check out his work on Dawgs247. He just posted his Rusty Ramblings. Love that. And it includes an update on Jalen Carter and a lot of other great info. Blair, the neutral site conundrum is complex. There are obviously advantages for the schools, but in the eyes of recruiting, how tough is it to lose an opportunity to host?
Yeah, that's 2 now for Georgia when you consider the season opener against Oregon at that neutral site in Atlanta, right? It's one of those things where you would hope to attract recruits. You would hope to bring them on campus. You would hope to bring them around the players in the locker room, and that's just not something that they can do, especially coming off a national championship victory, right? So I think it affects things. But Georgia isn't going to be weathered, right? That's not a big thing for them. They're recruiting at a completely different clip than any other school right now. And so I think what could change is the future scheduling, right? You look at maybe having those home and homes instead of a neutral site, despite the fact that it might be attractive to TV viewers and to the national audience. I think those schools like Georgia will have to now consider having those home and homes, potentially playing a home game here and going somewhere else to play a home game as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think when you win a national championship, all Kirby has to do is walk into your living room and say, hey, here's the trophy from the national championship. A lot more goes into it than that. All right, here is your last reminder. Cormani McClain making his long-awaited decision. You can watch it on CBS Sports HQ tonight at 6 o'clock. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube page. He's Blair Angulo. I'm Emily Proud, and thanks for watching the College Football Recruiting Show.